welcome everybody, and thank you for attending today. I'm going to be our host and very briefly give a little bit of an introduction before handing over to Richard. So yeah, I'm Adam Topping. I'm an account principal here at eSynergy. My responsibilities include positioning and direction of our engagements and quality through the commercial governance oversight. So this is new, this Ways of Working series. We're planning on doing it once a quarter, and it's alongside an event we do in parallel, our technical thought leadership event. And we've introduced this because we've learned really that the ways of working are really where the differentiators are in terms of how we execute, the principles we follow, and also the best practices we apply as a consultancy. So for this series, we're bringing in experts from all across the world to share their experiences and tell us how they've mastered their environments and how they've rallied their teams. We're looking at the principles they apply, and hopefully we can all learn from that over the series. So a little tiny bit on eSynergy just to kick us off. So we're a consultancy, and we're looking to change the way consultancy is done through progressive approaches and technology to release customer value. We've got our three main service offerings there. So cloud adoption, this is really where we focus on our lower level technical projects. We're delivering efficiency impacts through projects like platform builds and API integrations. And then with cloud native delivery in the center, this is absolutely where we're about customer impact. So here we're looking to achieve narratives around customer retention and customer acquisition, really showing where that value is being released. And then finally, on the right-hand side, we've got data and analytics. And this is all about optimizing, really shortening the time to actual insight and supporting our customers realize where the market opportunities are. A few of our clients at the moment, we work across financial services and government. It's our main area. Payo and payments would be an example, and Marsh and insurance. We also work very heavily with HMRC and the Home Office in government. So slide please, Adele. So brilliant. I'd like to make a real welcome to Richard today, who's going to be speaking around what he's learned so far and what not to do in Nationwide. Richard is a Ways of Working Enablement Leader. So Richard, over to you.
So here I am going to be talking through effectively a kind of almost like a half-time kind of talk as to where we were, where we've been, what we've learned, where we've got to now. And up front, this slide, I put it in here because originally, maybe 3 or 4 years back, we were talking about this idea of technology being easy, culture being hard. And this was a talk I think I did back in maybe 2018. And we gave it across a few months, talking about how the things that Adam's just highlighted in terms of cloud native adoption, platforms, connecting business and technology so that technology enabled change is really how you solve business problems in service to customer. We understood even then, 2017-18, that the technology itself, find creative, brave, pioneering technologists, make them empowered and enabled, create an environment and let them fly. And actually, we found that the technology, it's certainly not easy, but yet actually the culture, the environment, the setup is far more important to the success than necessarily the technology itself. The technology is almost then enabled by the environment. So back then we were doing something called digital transformation, and what I'll talk through now is that sort of I've struck it through. I don't not believe in digital transformation anymore, but certainly I think over the last few years, what's become clear to me is that word transformation itself is maybe slightly problematic. So I'll talk through what I've discovered about myself, the team, the work we're doing at Nationwide. I am also incredibly open to questions. I don't really have a particularly good filter on this. So if folks have questions they want to ask, I'll give you answers because I don't really know whether I'm supposed to or not supposed to. And I think it's important, if Nationwide's job is there to build society nationwide, then sharing our reflections and helping others on their journey feels to me like it's right square in the middle of what we should be doing. So without further ado, I will talk to you about 11 lessons and 11 reflections on tackling what is the cultural elephant. So the first thing, as I say, I am increasingly of a mind that the word transformation is a bit problematic. It lends itself to this idea that there is an end state, lends itself to this idea that there is a fixed target, and that ultimately transforming is something that you can get done, and you can hand it to somebody, and somebody can move you from somewhere not transformed to somewhere transformed and then nailed it. Just don't observe that. I don't observe that at all. And actually, if I go back to 2017 and think about building out AWS platforms and sticking tooling on my credit card and thinking about how to install Atlassian for Verity, all of these things were incredibly important in 2017-18. And they're still important. They're not done. We're just on the next evolution of that. And yet actually, culturally over that same period, the journey we have been on as an organization, how we structure ourselves, how we talk, the things we care about, the things we celebrate, the things we now call out as behaviorally away from where we're trying to head towards. Even the idea of away from and towards suggests that there isn't a transformation that is a before and an after, rather there's a journey. And the thing I think I've discovered over this last period is that actually the journey itself is what's rewarding. Maybe not every meeting, maybe not every day, but even if you can look back at the end of the week and think it's maybe not a score draw, maybe it's a 9-1 drubbing, but actually the one is still important. And so it is not that there is a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then you're transformed. It is that it is an ongoing journey, and there'll be a whole bunch of cul-de-sacs, and there'll be ports that you visit that you're not welcomed at. But you know what? It's all progress, it's all learning, and the evolutionary journey is itself incredibly uplifting. I think the second thing is this idea of then who's the transformation? I can mandate that this organization will transform. Well, I strongly don't believe that it is possible for teams to evolve themselves without support, without coherence in the environment, without absolute behavioral alignment between how leaders in the organization, and I don't mean the most senior folk, I mean leaders, how they behave every day, how they communicate, what they celebrate, how they coach. I don't believe that this is something that could be compelled and that is others to do. We observe that actually the role of leadership in supporting, nurturing, encouraging, highlighting, acting with candor and having the bravery to call out the things that are more in the away from than the towards camp, you will make very limited progress unless leaders go first and leaders exhibit the behaviors and champion ultimately the behavioral shifts we're expecting to see. And I think over the period that we've been working at this idea of we've said we want an agile transformation or a digital transformation, go ahead, transform. And you think, actually, do you know what? It just doesn't play that way. It plays in a way that says individuals and teams, safety to explore, safety to grow, safety to get things wrong, safety to learn are inherently about how leaders act and behave. The third thing is this sort of entrepreneurial spirit. And we've talked before about pioneers, settlers, and town planners. Thank you to Simon Wardley. And this sense that it's not true to say that one part of the organization is pioneering. So in our context, we created a specific area called digital in which to house pioneers. And those pioneers, though, came from across the organization. They came from the risk part of the business. They came from legal. They came from policy and process. They came from, yes, software engineering, and yes, creative design. And yes, we stood up a sense of product, and we stood up a sense of ownership and emergence for that product. But we housed the pioneers together, and we gave the pioneers at that time the degrees of freedom to explore in their own context together. And we were clear on almost the golden ticket they had, Willy Wonka-esque golden ticket, to be able to explore together. But we were clear as well on the rules. These are things that must not be broken. Everything else is up for debate, and pioneers, please go and explore. Go and explore safely, but go and explore rapidly, incrementally, feedback. And the pioneers should be celebrated for the brave, daring do that they are exhibiting day to day in what can often be quite a thankless environment. 99 out of 100 experiments may not bear the result that was maybe expected, and that's good. Be experimenting, be exploring, be innovating, and be safe to do so in an environment where actually your town planners are there holding down the existing organization, making sure that what we have is efficient and making sure that what we have today is serving the customers of today. Oh, there we go, the obvious, actual real telephone, just by the by. Mrs. James will be answering the telephone in the background, I'm sure. There you go. The need to have then town planners able to engage with pioneers has been incredibly important to us as well. So that the role of settler, the role of individuals who are comfortable in both camps, who are comfortable talking to those who are exploring and talking to those who are exploiting or optimizing, and navigating, translating, providing supply lines, providing feedback, enabling and encouraging safe skepticism, making it okay to be skeptical and for pioneers and innovators to accept the skepticism as pre-mortem considerations to reflect on for their next experiments. Again, that environment, if you don't have the pioneers and the settlers and the town planners able to work together, respect that they are diverse of background and point of view, but actually inclusive in a society or a business that are seeking to explore and exploit, this one is fundamental. Embrace those entrepreneurs, find those entrepreneurs and celebrate what they do. Don't shoot them down for being the crazy ones or the the sort of malcontents. I was doing this talk actually with Alex Barker, who is the co-author of the second in the Be More Pirate series. And I think that idea of they talk about building a crew. I think the idea of providing the safety, providing the rallying call, providing the compelling why, that becomes something that actually sits at the heart of this group of pioneers, and not just the pioneers, inspires crews to form in different parts of the organization, in different pockets. And there's a sort of almost a knowing glance between them that they know they're exploring at the edges. They know that actually that exploratory nature of the work they're doing is it's less certain. It's less confidence, but actually every exploratory step, every experiment, you have a sort of knowing glance across the table, or nowadays across the screen, towards others who are doing same things in pockets across the organization. And I think that sense of shared purpose, vision, ultimately Simon Sinek style, what's the why, enables you to establish a crew that is, again, not getting too naff and theoretical, but it's the sort of dual hierarchy thing. It's Kotter's invisible network hierarchy behind the organizations. If you can get that working, if you can find ways to build and connect crews, if you can build communities of practice and communities of practice of communities of practice, you are cooking on gas. This, I like this. It's a pioneer graphic equalizer. It's clever. The courage and curiosity thing. The work from Amy Edmondson in particular that references that sense of low barriers for interpersonal risk, that sense that actually you are prepared to have a diverse perspective, to be able to challenge the existing norms, to be able to explore something, fundamentally comes down to the safety, fundamentally comes down to having an environment where entrepreneurs are welcomed, having this space where pioneering at the edges and exploring as well as exploiting are welcomed within an organization. And I think for the individuals in that space, how does the courage and curiosity thing work? If they're dials on a graphic equalizer, how do you get them both up? And then if an experiment doesn't play out the way one might have expected, and if there is failure, what happens? Is it that curiosity goes down? Is it that courage is absolutely eaten away? Is it that when things don't play out, 99 experiments didn't work and it's only the 100th that might bear fruit in the way that your expected results played? Is every one of those exploratory steps where the result wasn't what was expected going to take you backwards, or does it almost further reinforce? Can you get to something where actually every single step that you take that is a step that you come back from and go in a different, can that reinforce courage and curiosity? Does it allow you to actually foster more of an interest in further exploration? So can you get to a place where actually the safety within these teams is such that failure is fuel? Can you get to something where that really continues to ignite, okay, so if it wasn't that, then what is it? And if this went wrong, then from a post-mortem, what can we do next? Can you keep the graphic equalizers up? And how do you courage, curiosity, candor, collaboration, all of these different words? How do you make sure the equalizer's there? And how do you spot the warning signs when it starts to look like one is dropping? Because it feels to me like they can all drop pretty quickly. And in some parts of the organization, they're almost like sellotaped low. So how do you unstick them, and how do you keep them high? How do you keep fostering safety? I think you foster it by these things, this learning. Learning isn't so much from my perspective, learning isn't so much the act of reading something or watching something on YouTube. It's the result of the practical application. It's the experiential engagement with doing something different as a result of having read or listened to or observed something different. So the learning isn't really the receipt of new information. It's the practical application and the feedback step that says, okay, in our context, in this team at this time, these are the things I have learned. So I think ultimately that sense of pioneering teams and psychological safety is reinforced through this love of learning, by which we don't just mean reading, we mean reading and then enacting change as a result. And I think that sense that across an organization, different groups can be learning, and different groups can be learning the same topics together, but in the context it's different, or can be exploring totally different areas, and just almost sharing because sharing learning encourages more. From my perspective, celebrating learning, book clubs, celebrating learning, again, communities of practice, celebrating learning, awards for giving something a go. These are behavioral traits of organizations who will ultimately deliver high performance. Again, Amy Edmondson. This one, because I was doing it with the pirate crew. Jargon. I'm guilty of this literally every week. How much random Japanese words can you throw in? I was hanging out in London on Friday, and somebody was talking to me about the difference between the 7 or 8 mudas of waste and then something called mura. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. There's now mudas and muras, and then there's some other words as well. If you're excited by the words, if for you each of these new words or new things you find reinforce your belief, that's great. But the risk that you then inflict language on folk and risk alienation through jargon, I need a whole heap more work on this as an individual, and the team I work with are helping me with this, because whilst I'm excited by all the new words and I'm excited to be able to then try and encourage others to be as excited, actually, do you know what? If you just end up coming across like somebody who's fueled by jargon and talks in theoretical riddles and adds in random Japanese words, it's alienating and ultimately threatening. So make sure the language resonates, make sure the why is still clean and clear, avoid language that risks alienation and tribalism, and having to pick camps. I cannot emphasize enough how important that one is. I don't know, whether we like this one or not, we live in volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous times. There is no two ways about it. I was just talking at the beginning here with Adam about notionally tomorrow I'm at Harry Potter World with the girls. It's the 3rd attempt to get to Harry Potter World. The previous 2 attempts have failed for different reasons. I think like Harry Potter was ill, I was ill, the girls were, I don't know. But we don't now exist in a world of the levels of certainty or stability. Given that is true, the whole language around VUCA, it was the big chat about VUCA over the last 5-6 years. Last year and a half, it's just an unavoidable element of daily life the fact that my house phone, which we are in 2021, but I have a house phone, is ringing whilst we're trying to talk and do a chat. The world is uncertain, and therefore the only approach is to be able to probe, sense, respond, to be able to conduct meaningfully safe to fail experiments, to be able to observe, orient, decide. These loops, these things that say in steady state times, in stable periods, in complicated zones, it is possible to feel confident in long-term plans. It just isn't. So you're going to have to embrace and explore experimentation, and you're going to have to tag that to measures, because it's not going to be possible to just tell people there aren't plans, that there's no point planning because next week we might get all sent home, and et cetera, et cetera. So for me, the ability to swap a long-term plan for near-term experimentation towards a goal with observable progress, measurable telemetry, I think is a fundamental to today, irrespective of whether you're trying to adopt modern ways of working or not. It's just how to live. And I think then, with that comes a need for a relentless focus on improvement, because if we do now live in these uncertain times, it's clear that the only way through it is through ongoing nudges, ongoing experiments, and actually focusing on the way of working as much as focusing on the results themselves, injects this essence of continuous improvement into working lives. The improvement, daily work being as important as the work itself. And then this imitate, assimilate, innovate, or shu-ha-ri model that says, do you know what, pioneers will find new things and need to pass that on, need to enable others who didn't feel ready yet. The pitch of the diffusion of innovation curve that talks about folk who aren't yet comfortable doing things, needing to have the innovators and early adopters to make it safe to explore. At which point, yes, you do then start to see early majority. It is scientifically proven that you start to see innovators and early adopters help make it safe for the early majority to engage. And almost back to your pioneers, settlers, town planners, that positive loop of then folk helping others who are ready to make the next step, and then those folk moving on and looking at the next thing. And again, that sort of that positive virtuous circle of learning, experiential, sharing, progress, and continuous improvement, where ultimately then we might start with needing some new rule books. We might need, by starting with some frameworks, we might benefit from having some things written down, but the standards that each team holds themselves to will emerge and will improve and ultimately will evolve. And the very best will then become the new laws, LORE, yes, become the new ways. There isn't one best way, rather there are incredibly emergent and evolutionary ways that become patterns and spread like wildfire. So I think that, again, we observe that over time, this focus on improvement. Last couple, can't do this unless you're going to challenge the status quo. I don't know whether this is acceptable now, because I think one of the status quo members passed away recently. But being able to challenge the status quo, having that sense of being empowered, having that sense of right to explore at the edges, and to be able to say, right, like the sort of would this make the boat go faster type stuff. It is not true anymore that we live in very strict rule-based societies where adherence and compliance to existing controls is the way to demonstrate good performance. We must be challenging the status quo. We must be able to engage with respect and humility on both sides, where we are touching up against the established working patterns and norms and organizational borders. And we must be in an environment where those with diverse perspectives feel safe to introduce those diverse perspectives, again, with a sense that actually, a bit like the Andon Cord culture, that sort of call for help is respected and ultimately cherished and desired. So challenging the status quo is both for those who are in positions of authority with controls, and for those teams who are seeking to explore the new. How do you get that engagement in a way that is on both sides respectful, humble, and keen to learn and explore? And then I think the last one would be that the way this works is through the sharing of social proof and measurable progress. And I think for some who are more data rational, being able to evidence measurable progress, whether we look at those DORA measures or whether we look at John Smart and Better Value, Sooner, Safer, Happier, those measures that are allowing us to evidence ongoing progress, ongoing the telemetry, not so much the sort of metric themselves, but the telemetry that suggests that where are we going? Are we improving sustainability? Are we improving the value to customer? Are we improving the cadence with which we're able to release into production and therefore learn to improve? And for some, it's more stories. It's more individuals and personal travails, and that sense that early adopters all the way through to late majority and skeptics need to be able to tell their stories to make it safe for the next person. You know that the lone nut dancing thing where it's not the first person who stands up and does the weird dance of the concert, it's then the second, it's the third. It's that sense that there's movement and storytelling that unlocks bravery and courage to explore and experiment. So for me, you're building a sustaining momentum is storytelling, and it's both storytelling with words, it's storytelling with data, storytelling with presentation, but ultimately, again, respect for where everyone is. You can't force this on people. This is something where it has got to become safe, and it's got to become ultimately momentum based, in which those who are progressing need to share their stories to make it safe for the next group. So that for me is probably enough talking at. They are the 11 things I think I reflect on over the last 3, 4, 5 years. I'm not saying that we've nailed all of them. I'm not saying that we've nailed any of them. I'm saying that they are things we focus on, and they are things that organizationally we care about. I'm saying that they're things that for me, I have observed to have had a positive tailwind to our progress. And I would be keen to hear from others, explore questions, at which point I'll stop sharing and back over to everyone else.
Thank you so much, Richard. That was really, really interesting and insightful. We're moving over to Q&A now, so please post your questions in the chat that you have for Richard. I've got one to start with, actually, if that's all right. I'll kick things off. For me, it's really interesting to hear about where you've got to with your 11 points, but I was a bit interested between the lines. So how do you go about sharing that pioneer thinking and the results of those experiments between crews through the organisation to get others' inputs? Because I just wondered how this scales. You talked about these wonderful silos of creativity, but just wondered how you scaled that comms, that communication between it. And then then how did you go about prioritizing that digital roadmap with the exec team? Because there can be disconnects, can't there, at times? So it's quite interested in that aspect as well.
Okay. So what I would observe, and this is based on the last sort of, particularly the last 18 or 20 months, is the move to this center of enablement, in which actually, therefore, I am not accountable for the way of working at Nationwide. I'm not sitting there with a sort of wet towel wrapped around my head saying, this is the way the team should work. This is how we do X, Y, Z, because that would be a nonsense, it'd be a literal nonsense. What instead we're doing is focusing on, again, that kind of gardening stuff about nurturing an environment where exploration, continuous improvement, sharing, communities of practice, the center of enablement then almost injects a very small number of people. There's less than 15 people in my team. And if I compare that I had 800 engineers in digital, and now I've got 15 enablement specialists. And those enablement specialists work across what for us is the society, working in our value streams, working in our major, what we call communities or departments, and just safely on an invite over inflict basis, introducing this why and some of the content around how, but kind of to kickstart when you think about the lean startup thing, you're just trying to kickstart the engine, so that actually the best example is if I think about our data analytics organization, we have what's called an enablement team. And the enablement team is this joint venture between a couple of enablement specialists from my team and then some champions from within the data analytics organization. And between only 5-6 folk, they are working across all the value streams inside our data analytics organization to just share better practices for objectives and key results adoption. Why do we introduce these things? How do teams set them rather than they sort of management by objectives bequeathing? How do teams align objectives and key results towards audacious aspirational goals for the organization? So these very small numbers of people working as a sort of fractal pattern across our organization in the context of the work then help imbue those parts of the organization with a bit more of a focus on continuous improvement, learning, and nudge to share. So our value stream organization is relatively new. It's less than a year old, and sort of helping those pioneers who were in the digital organization then share their reflections and learnings with the new value stream stretching beyond digital out fully end to end. Even there, those who've been on a journey for a couple of years sharing their positive learnings and the things that frustrated them with the new organizational constructs, I observe it really having a powerful impact because it's then in the context. It's in service of purposeful work that makes a difference for what we would class as our members or customers, is if you can put the improvement of the daily work alongside the daily work itself, it becomes more practical. It becomes more about improving operational effectiveness than it's some other team who are sort of trying to install or inflict or run a project. It becomes more about it's imbued inside the culture of the organization. So I think that kind of traverses your first and your second questions, Adam. For me, the fractal pattern of it, and then the fact that these very small number of enablement specialists know who to turn to. So they're not all full stack enablement specialists. It's a full stack capability. So some of them are more drawn by culture, and some of them are more drawn towards that sort of essence of how to support with psychological safety. Some of them are deep technologists who might have historically been involved in the creation of cloud platforms and the progression of CI/CD and sort of everything into the technical excellence domains, and actually drawing on each other's strengths to then support the different parts of the organization at their moment of need. So maybe that part of the organization isn't on the technical excellence journey yet. Maybe they're starting with alignment and autonomy. I know you've got people coming up talking about alignment and autonomy, but you sort of the slightly naff phrase, but I totally believe it. The meeting folk where they are. What are the challenges that are the operational challenges today for those areas of the business, and how do we then sensitively inject some opportunities to learn and progress and share, and how do we connect the groups who are then pioneering with those who are ready to pioneer? I'm not trying to inflict it on folk who aren't ready. It's not their next step. There isn't, I think, even one route. It's not that one thing precedes another. Rather, there are these topics that can be explored that in aggregate have quite a compelling effect. Okay, so I was going to have a look at some of the questions as well in parallel here. And Ian Hexter has called me out on jargon, and I said I couldn't help it, but we do live in uncertain and complex times. And certainly that thing VUCA, I always tried to avoid it because it just felt a bit naff. It felt a bit threatening. VUCA, blah, blah. There's no way around it now. I genuinely still don't know at whatever time, 12:35 today, whether I'm going to make it to Harry Potter tomorrow. It'll be like my third attempt. The level of uncertainty and ambiguity just means that we don't even need the acronym anymore. Acronym is now irrelevant. There's sort of like latent threat of VUCA. Mate, I just don't know what's going to happen later today, or whether there's a bubble impact to my daughters or blah, blah, blah. That's just how we live. So yes, avoiding jargon and things like VUCA is jargon. You are right. VUCA is it's no longer jargon. VUCA is just our world. Wayne Gay asked, how did COVID affect Nationwide? I think for Nationwide ways of working, COVID was a real shot in the arm because the future of work was suddenly brought to the present. Yeah, like there's that phrase about the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. If I think about the effects of COVID on how we had to trust and empower people, how ultimately you no longer had any essence of sort of control through presenteeism and a line of sight over people in sort of battery hen setups in different buildings. Whether we liked it or not, between March and April of last year, we were dragged, not even just kicking and screaming, we were just dropped into a new reality. And actually the new reality of this sort of future of work and in that period, sort of fully virtual and are now increasingly kind of hybrid, has almost foisted on everybody this sense that, to the point that everything's uncertain, the need for experimentation, the need for safety to explore, the need to always be pioneering has suddenly been brought into incredibly sharp focus by the world we've been dropped into without choice. So it's no longer a threat of VUCA on the existential horizon of, oh, rubbish, like it's now, it's today, it's tomorrow. So I think that for me, yes, certainly the lack of physical engagement. I've really enjoyed these last few weeks of just being able to head back into London and see people. Certainly I feel that organizational change is easier when you have access to all of your senses, like the ones we know about and the ones we don't know about. I certainly think it's easier when you're talking in more than two dimensions on a screen, but actually in aggregate, the effect of everyone being sent home and this kind of democratizing of access where the CEO has the same size rectangle on the screen as everyone else, I think that's in aggregate a positive. So Ian then asks, were there any organizational barriers that needed to be tackled in line with the culture levers, governance, funding? The answer is hell yes. So I'm doing some stuff recently, reading Kareem Harbert's book about 6 enablers, and this sense that, at a teams level, we relatively swiftly get to a place where teams with appropriate empowerment and the ability to explore and evolve their own team level ways of working, that's not the impediment. The impediment then becomes in the system of work, the management system, by which we mean the policies, the processes, and ultimately the behaviors of the management functions across everything from HR to finance to strategy to all of the different control areas that are either change prevention or change enablement. And so therefore for us, this sort of trend of future ways of working is to some extent about how teams explore and have the ability to safely explore in their own context. But it's a lot more about the organization in which those teams thrive rather than about the teams themselves. So therefore it is a leadership challenge. It is a system of work challenge, and treating the system of work almost like a product itself. What's the experience of the system of work for a team? As a developer arrives or an engineer arrives in the organization, how easy is it for them to crack on? How easy is it to hello world into a production context? How easy is it to get feedback? If you're not improving your system of work as a product that your internal colleagues consume as an experience, I think you're missing a trick. And I'm not saying for a second that we've nailed it, but I'm saying that we've got to focus on it. Salut Patrice, thank you for this insightful talk. Sorry if I've missed it because I lost the beginning, but could you describe what you call a value stream organization team? So historically, Nationwide, a very, very functionally oriented organization, traditional, maybe 10, 12 departments. 16, 17 months ago, so March, April of last year, we stood up what we've called our missions. So our missions are then 3 of them relating to, remembering that Nationwide is UK retail banking. So our 3 missions really reflect on the customer needs we service, what we would class as our member needs, member journeys. So our value streams nest inside missions. Missions are for homes and dreams, hassle-free money, and moments that matter. And value streams within those, or what we would call member needs streams, then reflect the sort of aggregate of end-to-end journeys that are involved in the home buying process or the landlord process or the tenant process. And they are a deliberate move to anchor conversations towards the member, with this sense of customer centricity, and a very deliberate organizational structural move to shift from departments being the primary axis to member or customer being the primary axis. Again, not fully bottomed out what those value streams are, exactly how those value streams operate, the sense of product ownership inside a value stream, Still lots of exploratory work there underway, and each different mission almost taking a subtly different lens on what's a value stream, what's a journey. Therefore, how does one compose the kind of socio-technical architecture of it? How do we bring applications and teams around the work in service of customer? But it's a real focus on orient decision-making and purpose for colleagues across the organization towards customer or member rather than function or department. John, what's been your biggest challenge in implementing agile ways of working at Nationwide? I'm going to say I don't think we are implementing agile ways of working. I think we are trying to unlock a culture of learning and continuous improvement for which the bodies of knowledge relating to lean, agile, systems thinking are applicable in different contexts, probably in all contexts. So I think for me, the biggest challenge is almost more that unlock between this sense that there's a new instruction manual that you deploy, and everyone who was doing X suddenly does Y, and you Thanos snap your organization to the agile organization because you've installed this particular new operating system. I just don't think it's true. I think it's true that what you're looking for is really nudging the culture towards creativity, nudging the culture to say, well, we do have these operational effectiveness and efficiency things we do today, and we have to explore, that sort of ambidextrous thing about being able to both do what you do today really well and look at tomorrow today. And I think we find that lean techniques work well for improving operational effectiveness, and I think we find that agile techniques allow for great exploration, and then finding the balance. Different areas of the organization, different intensities of explore and exploit allow for more or less focus on the bodies of knowledge from agile or the bodies of knowledge from lean and systems thinking and failure demand. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question directly, but for me, it's not so much that there is a agile with a capital A installation. I guess it's more the adaptability and the agility to reflect on, sense make what domain are you in, and what's the more likely pattern that would help us in this domain. Next one. So what emphasis do you place on coaching, and have you built internal coaches to support this journey? These enablement specialists, I am incredibly fortunate with the team that we've been able to assemble. Genuinely industry leading capability there that covers some of the core bodies of knowledge that does go back into agile working practices or lean working practices, and very comfortable with this sort of sense of why does one take a Kanban approach or a Scrum approach. So a sort of core of working practices, but more this sense of, for enablement specialists, what's their passion? Is it that project to product journey? Is it the culture of empowerment and autonomy with alignment? Is it deep technical excellence? And I think when we then talk about coaching, we talk about enablement specialists and enablement teams, where an enablement team that is in the context of the work, so data analytics enablement team or homes and dreams enablement team, where we're then bringing that coaching expertise in alongside the work to improve the work of teams in the team's context. Yes, that is coaching, but it's kind of player coaching as well, right? Like it's not true to say that the coaches always have the best answers. It's true to say that the enablement specialists working alongside the teams will explore and find better ways. And over time, I think those enablement specialists, you continue to kind of on that Shuhari journey we talked about, that they help folks transcend the next levels. And I think in some instances themselves get challenged in a positive way to keep exploring and to keep learning. So it's got that sort of nice synergy to it where yeah, you're coaching, but actually you're learning by coaching and improving and then applying it across the different contexts. Patrice, what are the main lean techniques you find the most valuable in your context for ways of working? Is it value stream mapping, A3s, Toyota Carter? Hey, Patrice, it's probably all of the above. I think because the value stream model is new to us, value stream mapping is the visualization of the end-to-end flow of work. is probably the thing that's been most important to us by virtue of the organizational redesign. So if historically we had functions and now we have value streams, in this world, particularly in this virtual world, visualizing that, being able to demonstrate the end-to-end flow from concept to cash, or ultimately from idea to learning and back again, visualization and then measurement are probably the two most important things that we would suggest from the bodies of lean. And then once you have the visualization of the end-to-end flow per value stream or per journey per value stream, then actually with the measurement that associates something like a better value stream and safer, happier alongside the end-to-end value stream visualization, then we can target continuous improvement. So then you are into your sort of, again, your lean books of, right, where's the bottleneck? Where's the most important impediment? How do we tackle with safe to fail experimentation at the bottleneck? And I think we probably take a sort of agile approach to experimentation with a very lean lens of, here be bottlenecks based on visualization and measurement in the context of work. So yes, we use the value stream mapping as the predominant introductory focus. And then actually things like A3 for where are we trying to get to? Where are our audacious goals? What's our hypotheses and due to we believe that will result in? That is probably where we put our focus. From Shalim, have you adopted any scaling frameworks, e.g. SAFe? In parts, in context, at times. So I would say in parts of our organization, our payments function went early, and in 2017-18 moved from projects and IT factory through to value streams, and did it from the book of SAFe. But we're treating SAFe as a framework rather than an instruction manual. And themselves then, yes, they introduce release train engineers. Yes, they've then got value streams that are end-to-end in the context of change. But actually, as we now shift the organization towards run and change, what we might class as DevOps, but particularly this idea that run and change is now one thing. Well, okay, then we're finding that some frameworks apply well, and some frameworks then act as a good grounding point to then explore further from. And in some other areas, the organization actually sort of leading SAFe or the sort of lean portfolio management areas are really helping, but I don't think they will implement even 1/10 of what SAFe 5.0 might say. So I think what we would observe is that whether it be less or SAFe or any of the scaling frameworks, it's more that they can help inform in the context what might be approaches that would help to improve flow. So it's certainly not a slavish adoption or adherence towards any of the scaling frameworks, but I'm agnostic. If there are areas of the organization that do want to, at a kind of shoe level, then introduce something like SAFe or less or DAD or whatever. It's a step forward. I think for me, the point of exhibiting agility is that you can't then install something and not seek to be improving. So even if you looked to the bodies of knowledge from the scaling frameworks, the question then is, okay, that's great. And so now what? Because it's not a transformation, it's an ongoing evolution. What's your next step? So I think that would be my response on that. Now that gets us through a whole rattle load of questions in reasonably short order. Thank you, Shalim. Nice question. Where next?
So I think it's back over to us. Is it Adele? Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And thank you, most of all, Richard, for a really insightful talk. I've certainly taken away a few things and made a few new connections that I might not have done before that. We have another talk in November that we'd like to share with you. We've got Dan North and Barry O'Reilly talking to us around demonstrating the value of their investments or our investments. I really hope that some of you can attend that as well. I think I'll also be talking for a bit, but I'll make sure there's plenty of time for Dan and Barry for the really interesting stuff as well. But thanks a lot, everyone, for attending. And Richard, thank you very much again for your talk.